Good morning, everyone. This is our lesson for Bible, which is chapter 20, or 1 Samuel 22 and 123, or sorry, 1 Samuel 22 and 1 Samuel 23. David is going to be fleeing from Saul for the next couple of chapters. Saul is becoming more and more unhinged. He is making less and less wise decisions, and David is trying to avoid him at all costs. We left off with David being in Gath with the king and acting like a madman. David flees from that after realizing that the people won't always, or people are starting to doubt the validity of the fact that he is supposed to be a madman, and he flees to a cave. During the next series of chapters, David spends a lot of time in the wilderness, and we get some really excellent stories or psalms that are written by David at this time. So he first flees to a cave in Adullam, where he sort of sets up a small camp for himself. At this time, he has a small following of people. While he's there, people visit him. His family, his fellow countrymen, other Hebrews and Jewish people join him, and his family goes there to comfort him, but the other people of the country go there to receive advice. And he begins to be seen as more and more important, not just as a military leader, but now as a spiritual leader and almost like a mentor. People are often asking advice of David, and he's willing to grant it. This is a different way of being a king than Saul. Saul has a very high opinion of himself. He's above the other people. He doesn't ask for their advice. He doesn't offer them advice. Where David has a different approach. He even in these desperate times, when it would be pretty reasonable for him to say something to the effect of, I can't have people with me right now because it's dangerous and stuff like that, he is willing to offer advice to his fellow countrymen. Now, his family joins him for a while, and they offer comfort as well. And David, recognizing that he's in a bit of a desperate spot, ends up actually going to Moab and dropping his family off and asking the king of Moab to take care of his family, and he's going to go and keep on moving through Israel. The most important thing that David needs to realize, and he does know this, is he must stay hidden at all times because Saul is out to get him. Now, while this is all happening, Saul has heard about his recent time in Nob. Doeg the Edomite went to Saul and said, this is where he is. Saul, along with some of his soldiers, go towards Nob, and they find Abimelech, and they also find other groups of people, the Benjamites. Now, Saul says something that's pretty discouraging as a king, and it's too bad that he says this and has his thoughts. But what's happening is he's feeling like he's being betrayed. Jonathan has gone to David while he was hiding in the cave. Jonathan's already defended David a couple times. Michal allowed David to escape. And Saul has an issue with the Benjamites right now. And he says something to the effect of, have I not done good things to you, and this is how you're going to repay me? And that indicates to us that Saul has been playing favorites as a king, and that there are some tribes and some groups of people that he is spending more time with, and he's giving an unproportional or disproportionate amount of wealth or positions of authority than other people in Israel. So we're hearing about this issue right now, and Saul is confronted by Abimelech, who has helped David, and he is really upset with Abimelech that he would ever do that. And Abimelech says, "Well, I'm doing the same thing I always do. Like, there's been many times where David's asked me advice on your behalf, and I've given it to him. And there's many times where I've had interactions with David. He is your most trusted man. I don't understand how I've done something wrong." And Saul's like, "You knew that he was against me." And there's no way that Abimelech could have known that Saul and David are having this feud. I think in my mind, Abimelech was acting in good faith, that he was trying his best, because, how would he know that Saul's after David? But that's not convincing to Saul. And so Saul makes a very impulsive decision. And he commands his soldiers at that time to kill the priests and Abimelech who have showed up to this meeting. His guards say no, but Doeg the Edomite says, I'll do it, and he ends up slaying around 85 people, 85 priests, and then goes to Nob and kills every single man, woman, and child that he finds there. I assume that Doeg is not some sort of incredible fighter that can take on 100 people at the same time. My assumption is he probably has a group of people that work with him. But nonetheless, they go to Nob on Saul's request and kills a whole lot of people. These are fellow Hebrews. These are people that are should have been people that Saul is protecting and caring for, and they're priests of God. And these are the people that are killed by Doeg. Now, there's only one person that actually escapes from all this, and this guy's name is Abiathar, or a different pronunciation of that. But he becomes significant later on in the story. But he's able to escape, and he flees to David. Now, David begins this sort of long line of saving towns and cities in Israel after hearing what's happening. Abiathar flees to David, and right as soon as that happens, David is told that a town somewhat nearby is under attack by the Philistines. And so David goes and attacks the Philistines and saves the town. While he's there, though, Saul hears about this, and Saul puts together an army to go and attack, and David rightly asks God, well, what am I supposed to do here? Because David finds himself in a town that's fortified, so he could stay there if he wanted to, but he asks two important questions, which is, first, is Saul coming to this town? And God says, yes, he is. And then David asks, if I stay here, will the people of the town give me up to Saul? And God says, yes, they will. So David, after hearing those two responses, chooses to flee, and then they get into a game of hide and seek. Saul constantly looking for David, and David fleeing to all sorts of different areas and regions across Israel. Israel is a very mountainous place. There are a lot of caves and valleys and hilltops and all these sorts of things. And while this is happening, Saul is trying to find David. At one point, the two of them get very, 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 very close to each other. But right before, they're on the other side of the mountain, essentially. So once one party's on one side of the mountain, the other party's on the other side of the mountain. David's been tracked. The Philistines attack, and Saul gives up pursuit and goes to help out his countrymen. These last two images are just to get an idea of where we're at right now, which is David is a wanted man. He is fleeing, but he's also understanding that this is something that God has put in his path. And then we hear about Saul, who's making more and more unwise decisions. He's acting more and more crazy every time. And it seems as though it's spiraling out of control. Saul's ostracizing, that means to be like essentially singling out or moving away from the many people that he's had around him before this time. And he's just having he's making so many unwise decisions, and he's just becoming more and more unhinged and less reliable as a king. And we're seeing this consistent shift of power between David and Saul as this time progresses. Now, I'm going to write this down on the assignment page, but there are 4 different texts that you can look into, and I'd like you to choose one of them, which actually is written from the perspective of David as all of this is happening. David is a well-known psalmist, and these are 4 different psalms that David writes while he is in this position of having to flee for his life. And I'd like you to choose one of these psalms, and your response is, what is David's central idea during this time? Okay, so read one of these psalms and then answer the question, what is David's central idea during this time? I hope this was helpful, and I hope you have a good rest of the day. I will see you later on today for our class meeting.